5 gangs in New Orleans, post-Katrina.
And today's sentences against members of the One Tenors gang were the result of 3.5 years of work.
But this dusty money, this the new version of the Hot Boys and Man and Fresh. Now I'm building up on that baby type shit.
Michael Anderson was accused of shooting 5 teens in Central City back in 2006, but federal prosecutors say he was not the one responsible.
And instead, they're pointing the finger at Telly Hankton.
New Orleans, a city renowned for its rich history, vibrant culture, and iconic jazz music, has also grappled with the darker side of urban life. Over the years, various gangs have emerged, each carving out its territory and establishing its dominance in the city's underworld. From drug trafficking to violent confrontations, these gangs have left an indelible mark on the city's landscape. This compilation delves into 5 of the most notorious gangs that have operated in New Orleans, shedding light on their origins, activities, key figures, and the legal actions taken against them. Before the devastation of Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans was characterized by small, localized gangs rooted in its 17 voting districts, known as wards. These weren't expansive gangs like the Crips or Bloods, but were local crews or cliques with 10 to 15 members each. The late 1980s saw the rise of some of the city's most infamous criminal organizations. Notable among them were the Glen Metz Gang, Sam Clay Organization, Hardy Boys, and the Richard Pina Organization. As the 1990s progressed, other groups like the Bally Boys and Hankton Organization emerged, with some persisting into the early 2000s. Hurricane Katrina reshaped the city's criminal landscape. Many gangs relocated, leading to violent confrontations in other cities. New Orleans-based gangs expanded their operations, reaching cities like Atlanta, Houston, New York, and more. To combat this surge in gang-related violence, Mayor Mitch Landrieu initiated the Multi-Agency Gang Unit in 2012. At number 5, we have Josephine Dog Pound.
Profile murders, federal investigators say police arrested the wrong guy. Michael Anderson was accused of shooting 5 teens in Central City back in 2006, but federal prosecutors say he was not the one responsible.
And instead, they're pointing the finger at Telly Hankton, a man who's been called the crime boss of New Orleans.
18, she 32. She like me on that young shit. I'm hood and I'm strapped up. My black tee, I don't act up. I play it cool and I act dumb. My Ruger left when he act up.
The Josephine Dog Pound Gang, commonly known as the Dog Pound, carved its reputation in Central City, New Orleans. The gang's moniker is derived from its origins on Josephine Street in Central City, with a history tracing back to 2003. The Dog Pound was deeply entrenched in Central City's drug trade. Their criminal record includes at least 4 murders, multiple attempted murders, and a series of shootings. The gang's modus operandi was to instill a climate of fear using violence and intimidation against rivals, witnesses, and even their victims. Michael Mike Anderson, recognized as a pivotal figure in the gang. Anderson was implicated in the 2006 shooting of 5 young men in Central City, a tragic event that occurred post-Hurricane Katrina and garnered significant media attention. Although initially found guilty, a subsequent overturning of the verdict due to prosecutorial misconduct led to Anderson entering a no-contest plea for the murders. He also admitted guilt in a federal court for his involvement in a racketeering conspiracy. A comprehensive federal investigation culminated in a 24-count indictment against multiple members of the gang, including Anderson. All 8 individuals named in this indictment subsequently entered guilty pleas. The gang's activities, particularly the 2006 quintuple homicide, thrust New Orleans into the national spotlight. It underscored the city's ongoing struggle with violent crime, especially in the turbulent aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. At number 4, we have Young Melph Mafia. Emerging around 2005, the Young Melph Mafia, or YMM, entrenched itself in Central City, New Orleans, maintaining its operations until roughly 2014. YMM's influence was palpable along Martin Luther King Boulevard, close to the erstwhile Melpomene housing development in Central City. From their adolescent years, YMM members were deeply involved in the street-level distribution of crack cocaine within Central City. Their criminal repertoire also included violent confrontations with rival factions, notably the 110ers. At just 23, Allen, a pivotal figure in YMM, faced convictions for RICO violations, firearms conspiracy, and multiple murder charges. His criminal record includes involvement in the murders of Vinnie Smith in April 2012, Deshaun Hartford in June 2012, and complicity in Travis Thomas's death in May 2013 on the I-10. Boyd's criminal journey culminated in a 40-year federal prison sentence after admitting to drug and firearm offenses. His sentence factored in his role in the 2013 homicide of Travis Thomas on I-10 West. Among other violent incidents, a slew of YMM members confronted federal indictments, with many opting for guilty pleas. These legal actions were part of a concerted effort by both local and federal agencies to curb the tide of gang-induced violence and drug trafficking in New Orleans. At number 3, we have the 110ers Gang.
Breaking news involving the murder of a 5-year-old girl and a mother of 3. Emotions ran high this afternoon as a judge imposes sentences in Breonna Allen and Shawana Pierce's killing.
Members of the 110ers Gang who were involved in a very high-profile murder in Central City 3.5 years ago. The mayor emerged from these steps calling this a sad day for the city of New Orleans.
Every member of the 110ers Gang was here at Tlane and Broad today. 11 of the suspected gang members still do not have attorneys. That's a big problem. Judge Tracy Fleming's Cavalier pushed back this hearing to try to determine counsel to July 12th. A lot of people tell us it's going to be very problematic as all of these 15 gang members have to be tried together, so getting individual representation is a problem.
The 110ers Gang carved its niche in the 10th and 11th wards of New Orleans, predominantly in the Uptown region. Many of its founding members hailed from the St. Thomas projects, which faced demolition in 1998, with a repertoire that includes drug trafficking, murder, theft, and kidnapping. The 110ers Gang is recognized as one of the most violent factions in their domain. Their criminal activities caught the attention of the multi-agency gang, MAG, unit in 2010, which subsequently linked them to multiple drug-induced homicides in the Central City area. The gang's violent streak often brought them into conflict with other gangs. Notably, they clashed with the Young Melph Mafia and the 8th Ward's Ride or Die gang, leading to prolonged violent confrontations. May 2013 marked a significant crackdown on the gang when 15 of its members faced charges in a comprehensive 51-count indictment. This was heralded as New Orleans' most sweeping street gang indictment. The charges pinned them for at least 10 murders, including a particularly hard-trending incident in May 2012. Among the many violent incidents attributed to the gang, the murder of 5-year-old Breonna Allen stands out. The young girl was on her porch during a relative's birthday celebration when members of a rival gang initiated a shooting. This incident also tragically claimed the life of Shawana Pierce, 33, who was merely driving past the scene. This event catalyzed a determined effort by both local and federal law enforcement to prosecute New Orleans gangs. At number 2, we have Byrd Gang.
One of the hardest out there. Free on the mouth, he be home real soon. Come on, put the camera on this. All my niggas doing banging on the show.
We got night hit you uptown. Got Chopper City niggas gon' bust for me.
It gon' always turn up when the killers link. Lot of evil in the room, only one can think. Covered up as he sliding up, cause he full of.
The Byrd Gang, also recognized as the Piff Gang, has its roots in Central City, New Orleans. The gang's inception can be traced back to the notorious TJP public housing development, colloquially known as the Magnolia Projects, with a track record in drug trafficking, murder, theft, and kidnapping. The Byrd Gang has earned its reputation as one of the most lethal gangs in New Orleans. The city's multi-agency gang unit has even labeled them as one of the most murderous gangs in town, highlighting their prolonged history of violence. Their long-standing feud with the 3NG Gang escalated during the 2009 Mardi Gras parade, resulting in a shooting that injured 7 individuals, including an infant. This incident thrust the gang into national limelight and piqued the FBI's interest. A daylight shootout on Magazine Street in 2017 saw 2 men injured due to the gang's activities. In a shocking event in November 2020, 6 Byrd Gang members faced charges for the murder of a woman from Grass Valley, California. The murder followed a botched attempt to buy 30 pounds of marijuana using counterfeit currency. In March 2018, a grand jury indicted 3 members on charges related to heroin distribution. August 2021 saw multiple gang members indicted by the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Louisiana. The charges span murder, racketeering, drug trafficking, and RICO violations, among others. The gang's hierarchy includes notable figures like Telly Hankton, who is recognized as one of its leaders. At number 1, we have the 39ers Gang.
New version of the cash money, but the dusty money, this the new version of the hot boys and man and fresh. Now I'm building up on that baby type shit, but this the new version of real is real.
Talk to explain, so please don't just talk on my name. I know some OGs that hop out and walk with a cane.
Yeah.
Free lit, straight up.
Yeah.
Just like that. Free sweat too.
You know what I'm talking about?
Man, we walk all the way from out the Jeep to the gas station.
The 39ers Gang, a formidable hybrid entity, was birthed from the union of the G Strip Gang from the Upper 9th Ward's Gallier Street and the 3NG, a renowned drug syndicate from Central City. Their stronghold was around 3rd and Galvez Streets. Notably, several members were also associated with the Florida housing development. In a strategic move in 2010, these gangs amalgamated to dominate the heroin trade across their territories. The gang's criminal activities span drug trafficking, bank robbery, prostitution, murder, theft, and kidnapping. Their violent streak is evident with links to over 45 murders, including the 2010 assassination of the acclaimed rapper, Magnolia Shorty. The 39ers Gang's dominance led to confrontations with various other gangs. Their rivalries include the Ride or Die Gang from the 8th Ward and factions associated with the erstwhile Calliope and Desire projects. Operating predominantly in the 9th Ward around Gallier Street, the G Strip Gang also had a presence around the Desire and Florida housing projects. Their involvement in multiple homicides in the 9th Ward has been documented by homicide detectives. This gang, with its roots in Central City, established its dominance around 3rd and Galvez Streets, close to the Calliope projects. Before their merger with the G Strip Gang, they controlled Central City's drug scene. Their early 2000s saw them clashing with another Central City faction, the Calliope Porch Boys. By 2003, the Porch Boys had been effectively decimated. February 2017 marked a significant crackdown on the gang. 10 of its members faced indictments on a range of charges, from racketeering to murder. All the accused received the harshest prison sentences. The charges implicated them in 14 murders, including the killing of a local rapper and a federal informant. The jury's verdict found all 10 guilty of racketeering. The intricate web of organized crime in New Orleans, as illustrated by the activities of these 5 gangs, underscores the challenges the city has faced in its fight against gang violence and drug trafficking. While law enforcement agencies have made significant strides in curbing the influence of these gangs, their legacy continues to impact the communities they once controlled. As New Orleans moves forward, it remains crucial to understand the history and dynamics of these gangs to ensure a safer future for all.
The gang supposedly calls themselves the Bleeders. Baton Rouge police started investigating armed robberies of 2 ATM repair technicians. The incidents happened between December of 2023 and January of this year. You're looking at the accused men.
All of these men are facing various charges.
These 5 men could spend the rest of their lives behind bars for the shooting death of Eugene Jethro. It happened on Pennsylvania Avenue in New Roads.
A months-long investigation into an alleged Baton Rouge-based gang led to the arrest of 5 suspects. Police say the group is a part of the gang, the 60 gang. The 4 suspects were already in jail, or these 4 suspects were already in jail on separate arrest, according to police.
Gang activity in Baton Rouge has become a focal point of law enforcement efforts, with multiple high-profile investigations and arrests making headlines. From the Bleeders and the Young and Reckless gangs to the 60 gang, Motion Boys, and the Bloc Boys, local authorities have been working to dismantle organized criminal networks that are deeply embedded in the city's neighborhoods. These gangs are involved in a wide range of illegal activities, including drug trafficking, armed robberies, and violent crimes, leading to multiple indictments and life-altering convictions for many members.
In other developing news this morning, Baton Rouge police making an arrest in connection to a deadly shooting that happened earlier this month.
Police say 20-year-old Rashawn Alexander pulled the trigger. Nicholas Williams on Aliquippa Street back on March 5th.
How this happened? Well, Sylvia, Rashawn Alexander, known locally as rapper Hot Boy Do, has been in and out of jail for several years. Prosecutors thought his most recent arrest would have kept him in jail until trial, but that didn't happen. This is video of Rashawn Alexander leaving the East Baton Rouge Parish Prison early Wednesday morning.
The jail let him go.
The problem is, the district attorney says he wasn't supposed to be released.
Apparently, he paid a commercial bond, and no holds were reflected at the prison for whatever reason, and he was able to bond out like anyone else would have.
The 21-year-old rapper has been in parish prison since March of 2023, waiting to stand trial on a charge of second-degree. Baton Rouge police arrested him then, accused of shooting Nicholas Williams. At the time, Alexander was out on bond for other charges. On Tuesday, during a routine motion hearing, Judge Tarvald Smith found no probable cause for one of those charges involving possession of a firearm. For reasons still unclear, there was no longer documentation holding Alexander in jail, and the jail allowed him to post a $260,000 bond and leave.
A months-long investigation into an alleged Baton Rouge-based gang led to the arrest of 5 suspects. Police say the group is a part of the gang, the 60 gang. The 4 suspects were already in jail, or these 4 suspects were already in jail on separate arrest, according to police.
So new tonight, this now former East Baton Rouge prison deputy is behind bars, accused of bringing contraband into the prison. Investigators say they got tipped off about it, so they began monitoring phone calls. They say an inmate was instructing his brother to call a woman. Investigators say that number belonged to this woman here, Tibrecia Gibson.
A months-long investigation into the Baton Rouge-based 60 gang has resulted in the arrests of 4 members, with charges for a 5th individual pending, according to law enforcement officials. Baton Rouge Police Department, BRPD, revealed that members of the 60 gang were arrested on various charges, including narcotics and weapons violations, as well as violent crimes such as deletion. Police had obtained warrants for the suspects, who were already incarcerated due to prior arrests. According to arrest records, members of the gang were offered $10,000 to silence a witness connected to a deletion that Henderson allegedly committed. The 5 suspects reportedly worked together to locate the witness. They discussed the plan extensively, exchanged photos, and plotted to steal a car in order to harm the witness, as described in the arrest report. In a related development, a deputy from the East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office, a female deputy, was arrested and fired after allegedly leaking information to her inmate boyfriend, a member of the 60 gang. She was charged with malfeasance in office and bringing contraband into a penal institution. The arrest warrant suggests that Gibson's arrest stemmed from the ongoing 60 gang investigation. In August, while monitoring phone calls, the district attorney's investigator overheard a conversation between Dedrick White and his brother, Lance White. They discussed sending Instagram messages to fellow inmate Rashawn Alexander to arrange a contraband exchange. The scheme was foiled when investigators intercepted a video of the handoff on August 19 and recovered drugs and a cell phone. After this incident, White and Alexander were transferred to a jail in East Carroll Parish, though White was later returned to East Baton Rouge. Authorities continued monitoring their calls, eventually identifying Gibson as the person communicating with Alexander. Gibson admitted to investigators that she had been in a relationship with Alexander for several years, and that after his 2024 arrest, he sent her money via cell phone apps. She also admitted to delivering envelopes she had received from Alexander's brother, Rasheen, which contained contraband. Authorities announced that both Rashon and Rasheen Alexander would also face charges for smuggling contraband into the prison.
A major blow to an alleged theft ring. East Baton Rouge Parish District Attorney says several gang members have now been hit with formal charges tied to multiple violent crimes and a number of drug and weapons offenses. Now, this gang is allegedly known as the Bleedas. Baton Rouge police say they're tied to an armed robbery, a couple of them, actually 2 ATM repair technicians. These men are now facing various charges, including 3 counts of armed robbery with a firearm, 1 count of attempted conspiracy to commit armed robbery.
Police say the group robbed ATMs across the parish of more than $300,000, a tactic we are told they learned in Houston and brought it here to Baton Rouge to get large amounts of cash.
They were waiting till the technicians got there and they were able to open up the ATMs and get the money out.
Sergeant Elgin McNeely with the Baton Rouge Police Department says that money was used in other crimes, including recent shootings, robberies, and drug deals. Because of that, several men accused of these crimes are facing an additional charge of criminal street gangs.
Alleged members of the Bleedas gang stood in a Baton Rouge courtroom awaiting their arraignments. The charges also carry criminal street gang enhancements, suggesting that these alleged crimes were committed to further the interests of the Bleedas organization, according to authorities. Among the 6, only 2 had retained legal representation. The Bleedas gang came under police scrutiny after a series of armed robberies, including incidents involving ATM repair technicians, during which nearly $360,000 was stolen. Investigations by the Baton Rouge Police Department and the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office ultimately linked these heists and other criminal activities in the area to the Bleedas gang. Police reports suggest that the Bleedas are aligned with other local gangs like Forgius and YTO. Young is taken over. These groups, marked by red symbols such as blood drops and mahjong tile designs, often share gang signs and hashtags like Bleeda and YTO on social media platforms. Authorities describe the Bleedas as a criminal enterprise based in the Glen Oaks neighborhood of Baton Rouge. One of the indicted defendants, Von Court, is a local rapper known as 40 Glock, according to reports. Investigators say they infiltrated the gang by monitoring members' Instagram posts, where several were seen flashing stacks of $50 bills in the days following the alleged robberies. The investigation into the Bleedas gang also uncovered a violent episode on January 4th, when 6 of its members were shot in a mass shooting at the Urban Meadows apartment complex. Juwan Lee Quinn, Alexi, met his demise in the attack, which police suspect was linked to ongoing gang disputes. 2 of the indicted men were among the 5 wounded in the shooting, police said. Nearly 3 years ago, city, parish, and state law enforcement officials made headlines with the indictment and arrest of 19 alleged members and associates of the Gardera area Big Money Bloc Boys street gang. These arrests were part of a significant crackdown involving charges of racketeering and various other crimes, marking the largest gang-related roundup in East Baton Rouge Parish's history. It was also the first major prosecution tied to the Baton Rouge Area Violence Elimination Project, known as BRAVE. The 24-count indictment against the group included serious charges such as attempted second-degree deletion, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and a range of drug and gun offenses. In January, nearly 3 years after the original indictment and after multiple delays, prosecutors dropped the racketeering charges. The original 19 defendants have since dwindled to 8, including 7 key figures prosecutors label as major players. Several defendants have either pleaded guilty or been dismissed from the case. The remaining 8 defendants will face separate trials. Moore admitted that prosecuting a large racketeering case is challenging, especially with so many defendants involved. He added that funding issues also complicated the process. Public Defender Mike Mitchell echoed those concerns, noting that his office had real financial constraints, making it difficult to manage the large, complex case. State District Judge Trudy White had initially ordered the state to set aside $3 million to pay for court-appointed lawyers for 7 of the defendants. However, the State First Circuit Court of Appeal reversed her decision, calling the amount exorbitant. As a result, White recused herself from the case, which was later reassigned to another judge. In March, the case was stayed once again when officials from the East Baton Rouge Parish Public Defender's Office and the Louisiana Public Defender Board argued there was no funding available for court-appointed attorneys. Judge Jerome Winsberg, who was appointed to oversee the case, reduced the defendants' bail and released those not serving time for unrelated charges. The stay was lifted in November when resources became available to pay the attorneys, and the court ordered prosecutors to simplify the charges further.
For the first time, Congress and local governments allowed the state of Louisiana to use the federal racketeer statute, also known as RICO, prosecuting all suspects alleged to be involved in a gang at once.
Young folks who want to be involved in gangs, guide yourselves accordingly, because the buck stops here. We're no longer playing with you. We're no longer dealing with you. We will start trying you under this RICO statute, trying your entire gangs.
In this case, these 5 men could spend the rest of their lives behind bars for the shooting of Eugene Jairou. It happened on Pennsylvania Avenue in New Roads. Deputies say the victim was shot to 3 different guns back in 2021, and whoever had any involvement in the case will be held accountable.
In one of Louisiana's first convictions under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO, 5 members of the Young and Reckless gang were sentenced to life in prison. The men were found guilty for the demise of Eugene Jairou III on January 21, 2021. The trial concluded on April 12 at the Pointe Coupée courthouse, where an emotional statement from the victim's family was read before the court. According to court documents, the men went to Giroux's home on Pennsylvania Avenue in New Roads, Louisiana, armed with multiple firearms, including an R rifle and 3 9mm pistols. The attack stemmed from an incident earlier that night when Jones' sister nearly met her demise from drugs obtained from the victim. Johnson, also known as Quarter Baby and believed to be the leader of the gang, orchestrated the deletion in retaliation. When the group arrived at Giroux's residence, they shot him 21 times after he answered the door, officials said.
They say call themselves the Motion Boys. Deputies say they found several locations used to hide and distribute all this stuff, the drugs, across the parish. Those 6 are now facing street gang charges and several drug and gun charges.
Deputies, though, are still looking for these 2 suspects in relation to that case. EBRSO says they believe Mitchell Johnson is the leader of the Motion Boys. Deputies say Chedrick Townsend is also involved.
Authorities in East Baton Rouge Parish are on the hunt for 2 suspects after a major drug bust involving a group known as the Motion Boys. According to the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office, a 2-month investigation targeted multiple individuals associated with the group. Investigators identified several locations used by the suspects to hide and distribute drugs throughout the parish, as well as the group's leader, Mitchell Johnson, and several other co-conspirators. The crackdown on gang-related crime in Baton Rouge underscores the city's commitment to curbing violence and dismantling dangerous organizations. While major operations have led to arrests, indictments, and even life sentences for some members, the fight against gang activity is far from over. Law enforcement continues to work on targeting these criminal enterprises, but the complex nature of gang structures and legal challenges means that ongoing vigilance will be necessary to ensure long-term progress in Baton Rouge's streets.
Michael Anderson was accused of shooting 5 teens in Central City back in 2006, but federal prosecutors say he was not the one responsible.
And instead, they're pointing the finger at Telly Hankton, a man who's been called the crime boss of New Orleans.
Alleged 3G gang pleaded not guilty to charges of murder, racketeering, and drugs and weapons.
Police are still looking for these 2 suspects, Kentrell Hickerson and Kevin Lynch. Warrants are out for their arrest, and when they are captured, they'll each be held on a $2 million bond.
As part of a push to lower the city's jail population due to the threat of the coronavirus, an accused drug gang ringleader was released on his own recognizance last.
In today's deep dive, we're exploring the underworld of New Orleans, focusing on the notorious gang leaders who have left an indelible mark on the city. From Telly Hankton's reign of terror with the Hankton Enterprise to the tragic rise and fall of Glenn McCormick and the D-Block gang, these figures have orchestrated some of the most violent and ruthless criminal enterprises in the region. We'll also look into the chilling case of Kentrell Black Hickerson, whose leadership of the 3G gang brought devastation to Central City, and the audacious criminal activities of Corey Doschef Expose and his Cutthroat City Snake Gang. These stories are not just about crime, they're about the relentless pursuit of power, the impact of violence on communities, and the complex web of justice that seeks to dismantle these dangerous organizations.
officials are calling a major bust. Investigators say they've taken a dangerous gang off the streets of New Orleans.
Scott, the gang is called the 6th Ward D Bloc, and District Attorney Leon Canizero says the 11 men who make up the gang have terrorized an area of the 6th Ward near Dumaine and Broad Street for years. Right now, 10 men are in custody. All are charged with racketeering. The men, as you see here, are Lance Prince, Sheldon Jackson, Mark Quinn Lewis, Blake Ricks, Nathaniel Brown, Torin Duhon, Jamal Howard, Terrell Muse, Cecil Martin, and Glenn McCormick. On the run is 20-year-old Darnell Ellis. Leon Canizero says the men operated in the 2600 block of Dumaine Street. Canizero says this is the first time in more than 10 years that a local prosecutor has used the racketeering statute against the gang.
As part of a push to lower the city's jail population due to the threat of the coronavirus, an accused drug gang ringleader was released on his own recognizance last week. He didn't last 4 days before he was shot. Investigative reporter Mike Perlstein has exclusive details.
Due to the threat of the coronavirus, Glenn McCormick was released from Orleans Parish Jail Thursday. He had been awaiting trial as one of the ringleaders of the notorious drug gang known as D Bloc. Here's the ankle monitor McCormick was wearing Sunday when he was cut down by a hail of bullets. Most people following stay-at-home orders, records show McCormick visited the Dumaine Street drug hotspot every day since his release.
And he frequents that place the entire time he's out.
When McCormick was first indicted in 2018, his bail was set at $1 million. Judge Darrell Durbany dropped that to $150,000 more than a year ago, then down to a free signature bond with a curfew last week.
So when he released him with no restrictions other than the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. curfew, basically signed a death warrant, and the judge failed miserably.
We're diving into another shocking case from the streets of New Orleans, this time focusing on the tragic and swift downfall of Glenn McCormick, the alleged leader of the D Bloc gang. This notorious gang, named after the area near Dumaine and Broad Streets where McCormick once lived, has long been associated with trafficking and violence in the Tlane neighborhood. McCormick's story took a dramatic turn when he was released from jail on a reconnaissance bond, a decision made due to concerns over the coronavirus pandemic. Just 2 years earlier, McCormick's bail had been set at $1 million due to his extensive criminal history. But in a surprising move, Orleans Parish District Judge Darrell Durbiny reduced his bail multiple times, eventually leading to his release on what seemed like a technicality. But McCormick's freedom was short-lived, less than 4 days, to be exact. On Sunday afternoon, McCormick was deleted in a hail of bullets at the very drug turf he once controlled. His release conditions included wearing an ankle monitor and following a curfew, but despite these measures, McCormick returned to his old stomping grounds immediately after his release. Surveillance data showed that McCormick spent his brief time of freedom revisiting the same neighborhood he was known to frequent, even with the state's stay-at-home orders in place. The deletion of McCormick has sparked outrage, with many pointed fingers at Judge Durbiny for what some are calling a reckless decision. Raphael Goyenesh, president of the Metropolitan Crime Commission, stated bluntly that the judge has blood on his hands for allowing McCormick's release with minimal restrictions. The decision has also drawn sharp criticism from District Attorney Leon Canizero, who argued that McCormick's deletion was entirely avoidable and served no public safety purpose. Adding to the complexity of this case is the presence of Johnny Johnson, a co-defendant in the same racketeering case, who was released under similar conditions. Shockingly, monitoring records show that Johnson was at the scene of McCormick's deletion within minutes, raising further questions about the circumstances surrounding this tragic event. McCormick's attorney expressed disbelief at the violent end of his client's life, describing the deletion as totally unexpected. However, the speed and violence of McCormick's deletion have left many in the community in shock, with the incident serving as a stark reminder of the dangerous world of gang life and the often tragic consequences that come with it.
10 men in the alleged 3G gang pleaded not guilty to charges of racketeering and drugs and weapons.
Police are still looking for these two suspects, Kentrell Hickerson and Kevin Lynch. Warrants are out for their arrest, and when they are captured, they'll each be held on a $2 million bond. WDSU anchor Rachel Wolf was in court today and has details.
18 alleged members of the 3NG gang were arraigned in court today, all pleading not guilty to the crimes they are charged with. It is the beginning of what many expect to be a long and complicated criminal proceeding.
The state says the 3NG gang ran a criminal drug enterprise that, quote, promoted a climate of fear through violence, and that half of the suspects are responsible for 10 murders.
This was unprecedented, what you saw today. In all those years I've been here, I've never seen anything like this.
We parents, we want to see what's going on with our child. We not criminals.
Tensions ran high inside and outside of a packed hearing at criminal court today. 18 members of an accused Central City gang arraigned today in criminal court. The case is so big and the accused crimes so heinous, added security was called in.
WDSU News anchor Rachel Wolf explains why this case could pose a legal problem for the city.
In all those years I've been here, I've never seen anything like this in terms of the arraignment. 20+ defendants, security at a maximum. It was unreal.
Security was tight inside Judge Camille Burris's courtroom as 18 alleged members of the 3NG gang heard the 29-count indictment against them, which includes gun and drug charges and racketeering.
And I think that is a shame and wrong.
Outside, family vented their frustrations after being turned away when the courtroom was full.
I want to be in there when they saying this about my son. I want to be right there and see what's going on with mine. That's my child up in there. He haven't been found guilty of no crime.
The state says the group ran a criminal drug enterprise in Central City that, quote, promoted a climate of fear through violence.
We're delving into the chilling story of Kentrell "Black" Hickerson, the notorious leader of the 3NG gang, who was just handed a 100-year sentence for his role in leading one of New Orleans' most violent criminal enterprises. The 3NG gang, named after its home turf at 3rd and Galvez Streets, has been active in Central City for years, using violence to dominate the drug markets. This gang's rise to power left a trail of bloodshed across the city, including some of the most tragic and high-profile deletions New Orleans has seen. Hickerson, now 36, was convicted of racketeering and conspiracy to distribution, charges that stem from his leadership in the gang's drug-dealing operations. Orleans Parish Criminal District Court Judge Camille Burris sentenced Hickerson to 100 years at hard labor in state prison. This sentence reflects the severity of the crimes he was convicted of, as well as his history as a repeat offender, which District Attorney Leon Canizzaro's office emphasized in court. During his trial, which spanned 2 weeks, Hickerson's former associates took the stand and provided testimony about his role in the gang's activities. They alleged that he was responsible for the deletions of Durrell Duke Pooler in October 2008 and Omar Bro 5 months later. Witnesses also claimed that Hickerson either directly committed or ordered several other deletions to solidify the gang's control over the Central City drug trade. One of the most haunting aspects of this case is that not all of the 3NG's victims were intended targets. A high-profile victim was rapper Renata Magnolia Shorty Lowe, who was caught in the crossfire during an attack primarily aimed at Jerome Man Hampton in December 2010. Magnolia Shorty and Man were both deleted as they sat in a car in New Orleans East, highlighting the violence that permeated the gang's activities. Hickerson's 100-year sentence marks a significant development in this case, but it also raises questions about the ongoing impact of gang violence in New Orleans. As Hickerson appeals his conviction, the legal process continues, and the community remains watchful of the outcomes that will follow. This case serves as a reminder of the complexities involved in addressing gang-related crime and the ongoing efforts to bring justice to those affected. Stay tuned as we continue to bring you updates and deeper insights into this case and others like it, offering a comprehensive look at the challenges faced by communities grappling with gang violence. We're diving into the story of Corey Da Chef Exposé, the alleged leader of the Cutthroat City Snake Gang, a notorious drug ring that claimed territory in New Orleans' lower 9th Ward around Flood and Marais Streets. Expose, who has a long history of criminal activity, just received a 20-year prison sentence under the state's habitual offender law. But this case is far from straightforward, and there's a lot more to unpack. Expose, now 33, chose to accept a flat 20-year sentence rather than risk facing life behind bars. His latest conviction stems from a 2009 arrest for attempted drug possession. But that's just one chapter in a criminal career that spans over a decade. Back in 2000, Expose pleaded guilty to possession with intent to distribute and was sentenced to 5 years. Then, in 2005, he received a 30-month sentence as a multiple offender after pleading guilty to drug possession. The plot thickens with a separate case involving Expose and 8 others, many of whom are related. They were indicted last September under a rarely used state racketeering law, accused of various drug offenses. These charges aren't just about small-time dealing, we're talking heavy volumes of drugs and a sophisticated operation. The case is still pending, and Expose remains a key defendant. What's particularly interesting is that several members of this alleged gang have been featured in a YouTube video where they're seen cooking up drugs and flaunting their lifestyle on camera. This kind of brazen behavior has made them a prime target for law enforcement, who are now using an obscure state racketeering law to connect the dots between these seemingly isolated crimes and paint a broader picture of organized gang activity. Among those indicted alongside Expose is Bruce Baldhead Carter, who has his own criminal past, including a 2004 conviction for aggravated second-degree battery, for which he was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Court records show that Carter and Expose have had a drug-related relationship dating back at least 14 years. The others indicted include Reginald Pookie LaFrance, Walter Lil Walt Thomas, Theodore Taz Keys III, Bilal Denley, Tinekia Washington, Nikisha Warren, and Ronald Rulo Expose, who is Corey Expose's brother.
Michael Anderson was accused of shooting 5 teens in Central City back in 2006, but federal prosecutors say he was not the one responsible.
And instead, they're pointing the finger at Telly Hankton, a man who's been called the crime boss of New Orleans. WDSU News reporter Travis Mackler is here with what this means for Anderson, who was first charged for this.
Well, most likely nothing, because his convictions were vacated years ago. But the fact the feds now say Hankton is the trigger man could prove detrimental at his upcoming trial. On this quiet Central City street corner today, no one wanted to talk about the killing that happened almost a decade ago. It's always been rumored that reputed crime boss Telly Hankton could be involved, and now the feds believe that's true. In a federal filing before Hankton's June murder trial in federal court, the feds say they believe he pulled the trigger on an assault rifle, killing 5 teens. Prosecutors want to use that information against Hankton, even though he's never been charged with the...
There are serious questions tonight surrounding the district attorney's office's witness protection system. This after a man whose brother testified in a high-profile case Saturday night. It's a story we first broke earlier today on WDSU.com. The victim's brother testified in the trial of Telly Hankton, also known as one of the most dangerous men in New Orleans. WDSU reporter Tiffany Bradley is on your side with what this killing could mean for the future of...
New Orleans police have confirmed that a 61-year-old man shot to the side of this Jazz Daiquiri and Lounge on Claiborne Avenue Saturday night is indeed the brother of a man who was a key witness in the Telly Hankton trial last month. A brutal uptown could be linked to the city's most dangerous criminal, who's now behind bars. Curtis Matthews, the co-owner of this daiquiri shop, was gunned down in front of his business Saturday night. But this shooting comes days after a high-profile criminal, Telly Hankton, was sentenced to life in prison. Curtis Matthews was the brother of the man who helped put Hankton behind bars. Back in September, John Matthews testified he was almost certain Hankton shot Darnell Stewart in front of his daiquiri shop in May 2008.
Criminals is now the center of a federal indictment, but the feds didn't stop with 36-year-old Telly Hankton. 12 of his family members and alleged associates were charged today in connection with a violent drug ring.
We went to the neighborhood where the Hanktons live to get reaction from the family to today's charges.
In the 1900 block of Josephine Street, just about everyone is family. The Hankton family, labeled by law enforcement as a violent drug trafficking organization, but Hankton family members and neighbors say that characterization is both unfair and untrue.
Don't listen to everything the media has to say, because the media don't know. If you was around the Hankton family, you will know them, and everything is not the truth.
Still, in an early morning sweep, federal agents rounded up Shirley Hankton and others related to or associated with the family.
Shirley Hankton is a wonderful woman, a wonderful grandmother.
In all, 13 people have been named in this federal indictment with charges ranging from conspiracy and money laundering to drug dealing and murder. The government says Telly Hankton is the leader of the group. Investigators allege the criminal activity dates back more than 15 years, spans 2 states, and includes 4, 2 of which happened here at the Jazz Daiquiri Lounge on Claiborne.
The city's most dangerous criminal is scheduled to start today. A judge continued Edward Allen's first-degree until today. Prosecutors say that Allen took part in the shooting death of Jesse Reed back in 2009. Allen is said to have committed the crime with Telly Hankton. Back in October, the district attorney's office argued to have Allen's trial pushed back until after Hankton's trial due to a concern for witness safety. But
we're diving into one of the most notorious criminal cases to come out of New Orleans, the story of Telly Hankton, Andre Hankton, Walter Porter, and Kevin Jackson, all key members of a violent street gang known as the Hankton Enterprise. This gang, led by Telly Hankton, ruled the streets of New Orleans' Central City neighborhood, dealing drugs and leaving a trail of violence in their wake. The Hankton Enterprise's criminal reign came to a head in 2004 when a deadly turf war broke out between them and a rival gang led by Brian Broussard. This bloody feud escalated into a series of brutal shootings, resulting in at least 7 deletions. 4 of these violent encounters became the focal point of the charges that ultimately brought down the Hankton Enterprise. One of the most chilling incidents was the deletion of Darnell Stewart, a member of Broussard's gang. Stewart had been involved in the deletion of Telly's cousin, George Hankton. Seeking revenge, Andre and Telly tracked down Stewart in broad daylight on Claiborne Avenue. After a high-speed chase, Telly jumped out of the car, and after Andre rammed Stewart with their vehicle, Telly stood over Stewart and hit him 10 times, deleting him on the spot. This cold-blooded execution was caught on surveillance footage from a nearby daiquiri shop, footage that would later play a crucial role in the case against them. But the violence didn't stop there. About a year later, Telly hired Walter Porter to take out Jesse Reed, another member of Broussard's gang, as further revenge for George's deletion. With the help of Kevin Jackson, they tracked Reed down and executed him in a gruesome attack, hitting him 50 times. Telly, already in prison for his role in Reed's deletion, continued to orchestrate violence from behind bars, ordering the deletion of the daiquiri shop owner who had provided the crucial surveillance footage to the police. The daiquiri shop owner survived an assassination attempt in 2010, but the following year, his brother was not so lucky. Porter, following Telly's orders, deleted the brother in what appeared to be a revenge deletion. The Hankton Enterprise's reign of terror finally came to an end in 2014 when a federal grand jury indicted Telly, Andre, Porter, Jackson, and 9 others on charges including violations of the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO, drug trafficking, illegal gun possession, and violent crimes in aid of racketeering. Their trial, held 2 years later, was a massive affair with dozens of exhibits and testimony from over 70 witnesses. The jury delivered a mixed verdict, convicting the defendants on some charges while acquitting them on others. This case serves as a stark reminder of the deadly consequences of gang violence and the relentless pursuit of justice by law enforcement to bring those responsible to account. As we wrap up our exploration of New Orleans' most infamous gang leaders, it's clear that the impact of their actions continues to resonate throughout the city. From the courtrooms where justice is sought to the neighborhoods still scarred by violence, the legacies of these gangs are felt every day. While many of these leaders are now behind bars, their stories serve as a stark reminder of the challenges law enforcement and communities face in the fight against organized crime. As New Orleans continues its journey towards healing and recovery, these cases will remain pivotal in understanding the city's ongoing struggle with gang violence. Stay tuned for more deep dives into the world of crime and justice.
The story of Michael Anderson and Telly Hankton, New Orleans, Camille, 61-year-old Curtis Matthews was gunned down in front of the Jazz Daiquiri Lounge on Saturday night. He suffered multiple gunshot wounds and died at the scene. We have learned that he is the brother of John Matthews, who testified against Telly Hankton at his last trial. He testified that he was 95 to 97% sure that it was indeed Hankton who gunned down Darnell Stewart in front of the Jazz Daiquiri Lounge back in 2008.
In the 1900 block of Josephine Street, just about everyone is family. The Hankton family, labeled by law enforcement as a violent drug trafficking organization, but Hankton family members and neighbors say that characterization is both unfair and untrue.
Don't listen to everything the media has to say, because the media don't know. If you was around the Hankton family, you will know them, and everything is not the truth.
Still, in an early morning sweep, federal agents rounded up Shirley Hankton and others related to or associated with the family.
The DA's office says a relative of Telly Hankton tried to sneak into the courthouse posing as a juror and using a side entrance.
The jury began deliberating in this case on Friday and handed down a verdict around 2 o'clock this afternoon. Now, Telly Hankton was charged with nearly a dozen racketeering charges, and he was found guilty on 9 of those charges. Those guilty verdicts were handed down on 3 charges of murder and aid of racketeering, also 3 charges of causing death through the use of a firearm. He's also guilty on other conspiracy charges. Now, Hankton and 4 other defendants pleaded not guilty to charges that they were part of an operation that started trafficking drugs in the mid-90s, which led to violence and murder. Hankton is already serving a life sentence on a state murder charge for killing Darnell Stewart. He was charged in federal court with murder and aid of racketeering in Stewart's 2008 death and the murder of Darvin Bessie and Jesse Reed. Now, one of the cases in the trial centered around the killing of 5 teens in Central City back in 2006. Prosecutors claim that Hankton was the gunman who killed those teens. On trial with Hankton was also alleged gunman Walter Porter and 2 of Hankton's cousins, Andre Hankton and Kevin Jackson. Now, Hankton's mother, Shirley, also pleaded guilty to racketeering charges back in May.
His prison sentence. Telly Hankton, once dubbed one of the city's most dangerous criminals, was sentenced earlier today. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hankton was convicted of murdering Darnell Stewart outside of a bar on South Claiborne.
The streets of Central City in New Orleans once echoed with the name Telly Hankton, a drug lord whose reign of terror culminated in a federal courtroom. Hankton, alongside his associates, faced a series of charges that painted a grim picture of the city's underworld. Telly Hankton, the Central City drug kingpin, along with uptown hitman Walter Porter and Hankton's cousins, Andre Hankton and Kevin Jackson, were put on trial. The jury delivered a decisive blow, finding Hankton guilty on 28 of the 35 charges in the racketeering case against him. Among the heinous crimes, both Hankton and Porter were convicted on 3 counts of murder in aid of racketeering. This charge alone carries a life prison term. Mayor Mitch Landrieu, in a statement, expressed relief, noting that Hankton and his associates had terrorized our streets for years. He further added that they epitomized the deeply entrenched culture of violence in New Orleans. The prosecution painted Hankton as a vengeful enforcer of a cocaine monopoly, with his operations centered around the family's stronghold on Josephine Street. His illicit activities spanned over 2 decades, as per a federal indictment from 2012. This indictment implicated Hankton and his associates in 5 murders, all allegedly committed to safeguard their drug empire. The case saw most of the 13 original defendants, predominantly Hankton family members, with 9, including Telly Hankton's mother, Shirley, pleading guilty even before the trial commenced. Hankton was no stranger to the prison system. He was already serving a life sentence from a 2011 state murder conviction for the killing of Darnell Stewart in May 2008. The jury, in this federal case, also found him guilty of the March 2006 killing of rival Darvin Bessie and the June 2009 murder of Jesse Reed. The victims, it emerged, had posed a challenge to Hankton's exclusive drug territory, leading to a feud that had its origins in the early 2000s. The chain of violence was set into motion with the December 2007 murder of George Cup Hankton, brother to Andre Hankton, allegedly at the hands of Stewart and Reed. Witness accounts painted a chilling picture of Walter Porter, described as a hitman who not only sought business from the Hanktons, but also boasted about his deeds. Porter, already on the brink of a life sentence for an unrelated contract killing in Gretna, was convicted on 3 counts of murder in aid of racketeering.
It's after one of the city's most high-profile murders, federal investigators say police arrested the wrong guy. Michael Anderson was accused of shooting 5 teens in Central City back in 2006, but federal prosecutors say he was not the one responsible.
And instead, they're pointing the finger at Telly Hankton, a man who's been called the crime boss of New Orleans. WDSU News reporter Travis Mackler is here with what this means for Anderson, who was first charged for this.
Well, most likely nothing, because his convictions were vacated years ago. But the fact the feds now say Hankton is the trigger man could prove detrimental at his upcoming murder trial. On this quiet Central City street corner today, no one wanted to talk about the killing that happened almost a decade ago. It's always been rumored that reputed crime boss Telly Hankton could be involved, and now the feds believe that's true.
In the intricate web of New Orleans' drug underworld, names like Michael Anderson and Telly Hankton stand out prominently. Their tales, intricately interwoven with the fabric of Central City, serve as a testament to the labyrinthine workings of the drug trade, the violence it engenders, and the impact it has on the communities ensnared within it. This narrative sheds light on the tumultuous journey of Michael Anderson, his connections with the influential Hankton family, and the events that led them to intersect in unpredictable ways. In July 1983, Michael Anderson testified in court. He was asked about his background and criminal history, as he was currently serving a life sentence after pleading guilty to several charges, including conspiracy to commit RICO and drug-related offenses. Michael grew up in Central City, New Orleans, and began selling drugs at the age of 13, starting with marijuana and later moving on to selling crack cocaine. He received guidance from a man named George Jackson, known as Bloc, who provided him with drugs to sell. Michael would sell drugs every day and eventually expanded his operation, obtaining larger quantities of crack. George Jackson was connected to the Hankton family, and they played a significant role in the drug distribution in the area. Michael stated that Telly Hankton supplied drugs to George and other dealers in the neighborhood, including himself. The area was bustling with drug buyers, and Michael and other dealers sold drugs directly to them on the streets. Telly Hankton was known for distributing large quantities of cocaine, ranging from quarter keys to multiple ounces. The drug trade in the neighborhood was thriving, and the Hankton family played a prominent role in supplying drugs to various dealers in the area. Conversation takes place in a neighborhood where Michael grew up with friends like Brian Broussard, who was like an older brother to him. Brian and his companions, Derek and Terrell Smothers, were deeply involved in the drug trade. They formed a close-knit group, and the entire neighborhood felt like one big family. George, a friend of Michael, provided him with a gun at the age of 16 to protect himself while getting involved in drug dealing. George also became Michael's initial drug supplier, giving him crack cocaine when he was just starting out. As Michael's involvement in the drug trade increased, George continued to supply him with drugs, earning trust and building a business relationship. Michael eventually began buying larger quantities of drugs, specifically a quarter kilo of crack cocaine. To afford this, Michael used money he received from his mother's fire insurance claim after their house was tragically burned down during Hurricane Katrina. Instead of using the money to replace belongings lost in the fire, he invested it in buying more drugs to expand his business. As the Michael drug dealings grew, he started working with Telly as well. Michael continued buying drugs from both George and Telly, building a reputation as a reliable customer who paid back his debts promptly. However, despite his success, he faced multiple arrests over the years due to his involvement in drug-related activities. These arrests interrupted his operations, but he always returned to the drug trade once he was released. Michael's reputation as a reliable customer who paid back debts promptly grew, even though he faced multiple arrests due to his involvement in drug-related activities. Michael Anderson needed to get in touch with someone. He flagged Telly Hankton down when he saw him driving a Cadillac Escalade down the street. Michael got in Telly's car, gave him $150, and told him what he wanted. Telly Hankton took the money, and they went to a house. Inside, Michael showed him $150 again, but Telly claimed it was short, so Michael had to give him the full amount. He then gave Michael crack cocaine in a brown paper bag, Michael testified. Time in the neighborhood, Telly didn't want any unnecessary attention or suspicion from law enforcement, so he asked Bloc to stop parking his fancy car on Josephine Street. Telly didn't want people to assume that Bloc was involved in drug dealing for him just because of the car's appearance. He wanted to avoid any potential issues that might arise due to the perception of Bloc being associated with his drug activities. At the time, Bloc was selling drugs, and Bloc wasn't buying from Telly. Bloc felt that if you weren't buying drugs from Telly, he didn't want you around his people. Telly operated from right there, and if the police caught anyone else dealing near him, it could create a conflict. Telly asked Bloc to move his car around the corner, and he complied. However, when Telly told him to stop hanging on the porch, Bloc got upset and questioned why Telly was bothering him when others weren't saying anything. Telly told Bloc to get off the porch, and they had a heated exchange, with Bloc expressing his frustration. Later, while at a house on 2011 Street, Bloc vented his anger about Telly, saying he wanted to harm him or even kill him. During this conversation, there was no agreement among them to carry out any violence against Telly. After some time, Bloc and Doo got shot. On another occasion, while walking home one night, Michael saw Telly coming in an S10 truck on the street off Jackson. He parked the truck and approached me, asking why Michael was looking at him a certain way. Michael told him I had no issue with him and had nothing to do with any problems he had with Bloc. He mentioned talking to my big brother Bubba, but Michael asserted that he was my own man and had no conflicts with him. The conversation ended with Telly getting back into his car and driving off. It was the last conversation Michael had with him based on that situation. After that, sometime in early 2004, between Jackson Street and Josephine Street, I was sitting in a yard with a gate and a plum tree on Saratoga, selling drugs in the dark to avoid police attention. Michael heard 2 gunshots, and when I looked, I saw Bloc and Telly near Blic's car. More gunshots followed, and then I saw Bloc running. I couldn't see who was shooting, but someone fired several more shots up the street. When Michael Anderson saw Telly running away, he was about 2 houses away from him, and Michael could clearly see him with a rag around his neck and a hat on his head. Michael was standing behind a gate in front of a porch at the time. After witnessing the shooting, Michael went around to his house and stayed around the corner, thinking about what had just happened. Eventually, he heard the ambulance and saw them putting up tape. Michael walked back around and saw 2 ambulances, one near the house of Durning and Toya and another near the bar room on Simon Bolivar and St. Andrew Street. They said that Doo had passed out when he got shot. Michael called a girl he knew to take him to the hospital, where many people from the Hankton family and their neighborhood gathered. Everyone wanted to know what was happening with Bloc. Michael didn't get to see Bloc that night because they rushed him to surgery due to the gunshot wound. After Michael Anderson got out of prison in March 2005, he found out that Bloc had been shot again in 2005. Darnell Stewart, Pluck and Doo Robinson were in a car when they encountered Michael on Jackson Street. Pluck asked him if he had a gun, to which Michael responded that he didn't. Pluck mentioned that they had just gotten into a confrontation with Pee Wee on Josephine LaSalle. Pluck and Doo eventually got shot on Washington and LaSalle, allegedly by Pee Wee and Rel. Michael also encountered Telly Hankton in jail twice. The first time, Telly was wanted for Darnell Stewart's murder, but he bonded out. The second time, Telly was in jail for another murder. They spoke in the shower on the same floor, and Telly mentioned that he had a witness coming forward against him in the upcoming trial for Darnell Stewart's murder. Telly asked Michael to relay a message to Derek Smothers, who was good friends with Telly, to not write letters or communicate with him during the trial. In federal custody in 2012, while Michael Anderson was in the holding tanks on the docks, he encountered Walter Porter, whom he knew from his case and jail situation. Michael struck up a conversation with Walter and mentioned hearing about him being involved in the killing of Kenny Robinson, also known as Skunk. Walter confirmed this and said that someone named Slim had paid him to do it. Michael knew Kenny from their neighborhood and was aware of the ongoing issues between Kenny, also known as Skunk. Walter didn't disclose the specific amount he was paid for the killing. Michael Anderson's story, from the streets of Central City to the cold confines of prison, paints a vivid picture of the drug trade's relentless grip on individuals and communities. Through his interactions with Telly Hankton and others, we get a glimpse into the complexities and perils of life on the edge, marked by trust, betrayal, violence, and survival. The intricate tales of both Michael and Telly serve as a haunting reminder of the real human costs of a system that, for many, offers a way out.
Glen Metz Organization, Calliope Projects, New Orleans.
The gang stuff. There was never no Metz gang. They created a Metz gang to create the organized crime. So let's get that understood. There was never no Metz gang. It just took people and pieced them together because they was affiliated with each other and said, well, hey, this your enforcers, this your brains, y'all two are the kingpin, queenpin, whatever you want to call it, and so we can hit you with the RICO statute. Oh, we can't have the we're gonna get the RICO, we're gonna hit them with organized crime, we're gonna hit them with this, we're gonna hit them with that. Yeah, because you couldn't get them individually. You couldn't take him to trial, you couldn't take Danielle to trial, you couldn't take this one to trial, you couldn't take that one to trial. You had to take them as a group. That's why they called it a gang, but it was never a gang, but that was the way they got it.
Today, we'll be talking about the Glen Metz Organization, a notorious drug ring that operated in the New Orleans metropolitan area from 1985 to mid-1992.
Everything that we've heard about the Glen Metz gang has come either from law enforcement, the government, or street gossip. But we haven't heard about the Glen Metz gang from somebody who was actually there. So, what should people know about the Glen Metz gang?
Okay, the Glen Metz organization or gang was really what the government manufactured in their investigation of Glen Metz drugs, distribution of drugs. There was no such thing as a Glen Metz gang. Glen Metz participated in a degree of distribution of cocaine. And in that distribution, he distributed drugs to multiple people who, over a course of time, caught their own cases. But they testified at our trial that they got their drugs from either Glen, whether they were Colombians, they were Cubans, a guy named RICO, a guy named Ivan Gonzalez, Eliseo Melendez. These were drug dealers from foreign drug dealers, Colombians and Cubans, who testified that they supplied Glen Metz. And others testified that they received drugs from Glen Metz. But they identified Glen's wife, Danielle. A couple of them identified Glen's brother as either picking up money or something to that degree. And basically, that was what was really a drug conspiracy. The government made it into a drug gang. The reason they made it into a drug gang is because they wanted to include myself, Gerald Nap Elwood. They wanted to include Gennaro Meatball Arthur, and they wanted to include Marlo Helmstetter.
Glen Metz and his brother Cordell Jethro Metz founded the Metz Gang, a notorious drug ring that operated in the New Orleans metropolitan area from 1985 to mid-1992. During this time, the gang distributed approximately 1,000 kilograms of cocaine and committed several violent crimes, including murders and attempted murders. In 1993, Glen Metz, his wife Danielle Metz, and several henchmen were indicted on 22 counts related to the narcotics conspiracy. They were found guilty and received lengthy prison sentences. Glen Metz was sentenced to life in prison. In 2016, Danielle Metz's life sentence was commuted by President Barack Obama.
If you read any of it, you're going to see that they allege that Glen Metz ordered this murder of Samuel Lee Clayton, which everybody knows is Sam Scully. The same Sam Scully that I spoke about earlier, wherein I said that a war was going on in the uptown area with the Sam Scully, Terrell Sterling, which manufactured it all the way into what you call like 18. Well, they now allege in the federal indictment that was started by Glen Metz having Sam Scully murdered in 1987. Now, this is the reason behind that was that, as I explained, that there was no other way to bring up those other murders in the state, because once it was dismissed in the state, it was over with.
In 1987, the emergence of crack cocaine in New Orleans resulted in a wave of crime that was as chaotic and erratic as the drug itself. With dealers being arrested or killed, new ones quickly replaced them on street corners. Alliances were formed and broke in for each big sale, and profits were short-lived due to the rapid onset of addiction. In the midst of this violence, Glen Metz's gang rose to become the city's first organized drug syndicate after the demise of Sam Scully, Clay's crew in the Calliope projects. Metz's gang held a tight grip on the narcotics trade in several public housing complexes since 1985, using violence to eliminate any competition. However, in the early 1990s, the New Orleans Police Department began a crackdown on gangs and managed to apprehend more than 150 members and enforcers. In 1992, Derek Mahone, a top enforcer for the gang and a prisoner at the Louisiana Training Institute in Monroe, escaped from custody. During his time on the run, he was apprehended and subsequently released 6 times, with 4 of those instances being related to weapons charges. The following year, in Algiers, Derek was the target of a violent attack that nearly claimed his life. As reported by the Times-Picayune, 3 assailants armed with submachine guns fired upon Derek in a parking lot, striking him with bullets a total of 17 times. In January 1993, federal authorities followed a series of tips in rural Mississippi, ultimately leading to the capture of Danielle Metz, the last remaining fugitive, at an apartment complex in Jackson. According to a deputy marshal, information had led U.S. Marshals to Yazoo City, where several residents recognized photographs of Metz. It appeared that Metz had connections in Yazoo County. On December 15, 1993, Metz was convicted of several charges, including conspiracy to possess and distribute cocaine, continuing criminal enterprise, possession with intent to distribute cocaine, and laundering of monetary instruments. The judge imposed a mandatory life sentence in prison.
Gennaro Arthur, better known as Meatball, is one of the most notorious names in uptown New Orleans, if not the entire New Orleans. However, very little has been said about Arthur the man, and when it comes to myths and folklore, Arthur's name has been at the forefront of many of those myths.
I mean, there's a lot of myths put it on top of his head. You know, a lot of things that he was charged for in the streets, he didn't really do. You know what I'm saying? He didn't do a lot of those things. And I'm not saying that just because of the family ties. I'm pretty much saying it because it's real. You know, I know a lot of things about Meatball. I remember one of the things about Meatball that kind of stuck to people and it kind of went around and people copycatted it was they say that Meatball used to dress like a woman and rob people or even kill people. And that was referred from the truest possible. You know, the reason that he wore dress, it was a joke. It was to him and a few of his homies, you know, they were dressed up like women. And it was for Halloween. And they pretty much just were bullshitting around. But, of course, they had guns on.
Yeah.
I mean, they are street dudes, you know. So people just attributed that to, oh, they're going to rob somebody and kill somebody dressed like a woman. And that story stuck. And even to this day, everybody say that about it.
In 1992, enforcers Gennaro Meatball Arthur and Gerald Elwood were arrested and indicted with 10 other members for murder and cocaine distribution. Arthur, who was suspected of killing 70 people, was arrested in a Seattle restaurant where he was hiding out as a dishwasher. Marshals Service said Arthur is believed to have been hiding out in Seattle for 2 or 3 years. In his role as an enforcer, marshals say Arthur is believed to have machine gunned to death 3 people and wounded 2 others in the so-called Deer Heart Expressway ambush in 1990. On another occasion, marshals claim Arthur confronted a government witness in a housing project and machine gunned the man in the legs, leaving him as an example to others who might consider testifying against the Metz group. Law enforcement officials also believe Arthur was the trigger man in the Scully Clay murder, although they were never able to get any sound evidence on him about that case, which remains unsolved to date.
Worst neighborhoods in New Orleans, 2022.
93 murders have taken place in New Orleans between the beginning of 2022 through the month of April. 243 murders have also occurred over the past 12 months. Asher says that the city likely had the highest murder rates in the nation.
The people that were committing armed robberies didn't have their usual prey available because people weren't on foot. So they shifted to cars.
He says homicides are also up with 77 so far this year. That's a 51% increase since last year. But those numbers have been climbing since 2019 when New Orleans saw the lowest murder total in nearly 50 years.
Sean Ferguson gave an update on the crime here in New Orleans, and the numbers show there's been little to no improvement. Many say it has a lot to do with burnout and low morale in the NOPD.
24 people shot in just 4 days. And yes, you heard that correctly, 24. And that is just in the city of New Orleans. 7 people total dead, and 4 of those deaths were in Algiers over the weekend. Now, last night during the show, we talked a little bit about our crime issue.
Today, we are going to take a look at the city of New Orleans, which has a history of violence and crime. The crime rates are higher than the average in Louisiana. There are many reasons for this, but it is clear that the high levels of poverty play a major role. It is not just about poverty, it is about race as well. The city of New Orleans has always been known for its racial divide and the way that it has affected the population. The economy is also a contributing factor to crime rates in New Orleans. There are many jobs available, but not enough people to fill them, which leads to high unemployment rates and poverty levels. This leaves many people without hope for their future and looking for ways to make money illegally. Hines Village, New Orleans.
So I just spoke with the New Orleans Police Department. They say that around 10 a.m. they got a call about a man being shot multiple times. They found him dead right here on the scene. They say they have no suspects at this hour.
The NOPD is investigating the shooting of a woman near the Lakefront Airport tonight.
Police got the call of shots fired around 6:40 this evening. This happened in the 5900 block of Babylon Street. The woman was taken to the hospital at this hour. Her condition is unknown.
We have Pines Village, which is a small community in New Orleans. It has been plagued by crime for years. The police have been unable to stop the crime wave that has plagued the community. The residents of Pines Village are tired of living in fear and want to see change. They have decided to take matters into their own hands by trying to combat the crime problem. St. Claude, New Orleans.
New Orleans police are trying to find the suspect behind a murder. This was in the St. Claude neighborhood. It happened just before 9:30 last night near the intersection of Gallier Street and North Robertson.
Officers responded to calls of a shooting and found the victim, an unidentified man lying next to a four-wheeler. That victim did die on the scene.
Are investigating a double shooting in the St. Claude neighborhood. Around 3:30 this afternoon is when everything went down. Cops say someone shot at a man on France and North Villeray streets, hitting him in the foot. We're told he was taken to an area hospital, and just moments ago, police told us a second victim, a woman, showed up at the hospital as well.
And new tonight, New Orleans police responded to a deadly shooting in the St. Claude neighborhood. It happened just before 7:30 on France Street near Urquhart. A man was found lying in the road, shot multiple times. He was pronounced dead right there. Police did not release any other information about it, though.
Homicide in the St. Claude neighborhood. It happened this morning in the 1600 block of France Street. Officers say they found a man dead after being shot inside a home. Cops say at this time there's no motive and nobody has been arrested.
St. Claude has a population of more than 6,500 people. This neighborhood is plagued with shootings, rapes, and many other crimes that surfaces this area. St. Claude has a 99% rate of more crime than New Orleans itself. More than 2,500 crimes happen in St. Claude for every 100,000 on the surface. There are around 10 times the national average records of assaults in this region. Tlane Graier, New Orleans.
New Orleans police responded to an early morning shooting in the Tlane Graier neighborhood. A 33-year-old man was found shot to death at the intersection of South Broad Avenue and Graier Street just after midnight. His identification has not yet been released pending notification of his family.
Initial reports report that 2 people have died. We got here, we saw at least 1 body on the ground. Police are still investigating it. Initially, we heard that there were 5 victims. 2 of them have died and succumbed to their injuries. But again, everything very fluid right now. We're still waiting to hear from information from the public information officer with NOPD. But again,
the New Orleans Police Department on the search for the suspect involved in a double shooting. The person responsible for killing both a man and a woman. This happened near the intersection of Perdido and South Dergenwa streets last night, shortly after 9 o'clock. Officers found the 2 victims suffering from gunshot wounds lying in the streets. Once they arrived on scene, both people were pronounced dead at that time.
The Tlane Graier New Orleans neighborhood is one of the most dangerous in the United States. It is located on the border of New Orleans and neighboring Algiers, Louisiana. The neighborhood has been plagued by crime and violence for decades, with a high number of murders per capita. The area also has a high number of shootings and robberies per capita, as well as an unemployment rate that is nearly twice as high as the national average. The neighborhood was originally developed as an industrial area, but it became more residential after Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans in 2005. Central City, New Orleans.
New Orleans Police Department investigating a double shooting from Central City. This happened shortly after 7 o'clock last night near the intersection of South Dergenwa and Earhart Boulevard. Police say a man and woman were both shot and then taken to an area hospital for
firing. Bullets came through here and went through my wall.
There's a hole there, a hole here, holes behind the sofa.
It sounded like a war zone. A war zone, high-powered machine guns on 7th and Saratoga in this city.
Carolina Gallup has 2 bullet holes in front of her home, 3 in her SUV, and at least 2 holes in her metal fence.
Right now, 1 person's in custody in connection with a murder in Central City. New Orleans police say a man was shot and killed in the 1200 block of Reverend John Raphael Way earlier this morning. They say the suspect tried running away, but they were able to arrest him on Magnolia Street.
It's after one of the city's most high-profile murders. Federal investigators say police arrested the wrong guy. Michael Anderson was accused of shooting 5 teens in Central City back in 2006, but federal prosecutors say he was not the one responsible.
And instead, they're pointing the finger at Telly Hankton, a man who's been called the crime boss of New Orleans.
The Central City neighborhood of New Orleans is one of the most dangerous places in America. The crime rate is high, and there are many abandoned buildings that have been left to rot. The Central City of New Orleans is so dangerous because it has been neglected for decades and people have moved out to other parts of the country. St. Roch, New Orleans.
Police also investigating a separate shooting that took place just hours earlier. NOPD says this incident happened in the St. Roch area around 5:15 yesterday evening. They say a man had been shot near St. Roch in North Miro. He's now in the hospital. No word on his condition as of this morning.
It's a crime scene that stretches 3 blocks along St. Roch Avenue in the St. Roch neighborhood of New Orleans. A triple shooting, leaving 1 man dead and 2 others injured. It happened late Wednesday afternoon when police were called to a shooting. That's when they found 2 men shot near the intersection of St. Roch and Peace Court. A block over, 1 man was dead on North Rocheblave. Neighbors and family members we spoke with did not want to go on camera, but say 2 of the men were cousins.
Charles Williams is accused of 6 separate shooting incidents, killing 1 person, and he's accused of 2 armed carjackings and 2 armed robberies back in April.
Continue to follow breaking news of a triple shooting in New Orleans East. The NOPD reports that 3 people were shot this morning on Elysian Fields near the I-610. Now, the Eyewitness News is on the scene right now. This is a live look there where you can see the investigation appears to be centered in the parking lot of a Burger King there in the area.
St. Roch has been called the most dangerous neighborhood in America. The neighborhood has a high crime rate and the number of murders that have occurred there are staggering. St. Roch was built on top of an old cemetery, which means that it's full of ghosts and spirits. Desire, New Orleans.
PD investigations continue. Multiple investigations after 4 different people were shot, all in the Desire neighborhood in less than 24 hours. The most recent incident, a triple shooting. It happened last night on Morris Duncan Drive. 3 victims in all, 2 women and 1 man were all injured.
Police are investigating reports of an officer-involved shooting in the Desire neighborhood in the 9th Ward. All of this unfolding just about within the last half hour or so. Now, the incident has happened near the intersection of Alvar and Higgins. Again, that's in the Desire area.
And more breaking news tonight. Just after 9, 2 people were shot in the 3400 block of Louisa Street. 1 of the victims has died. Right now, very little other information has been released, but police were focused on a vehicle on the street. This latest shooting in the Desire neighborhood brings the number of people shot across New Orleans to 14 since yesterday evening.
The New Orleans Police Department reported that a woman was fatally shot sometime before 10:30 p.m. Wednesday night in the 3600 block of Metropolitan Street in the Desire neighborhood. This morning, yellow tape was still visible around the area, and neighbors declined to be interviewed, but said that the woman had lived in the rear section of this double home for about a year.
This Desire neighborhood in New Orleans has been plagued for many years. The reasons for this are many and complex, but one of the most important factors is the lack of jobs. This neighborhood has been struggling to find ways to create jobs and provide opportunities for its residents. Crime is a major issue in New Orleans. The city has the highest murder rate in the country, and it is also one of the most dangerous cities in America. There are many factors that contribute to this problem, but there are some solutions that can help fix this issue. One main solution is to allocate funds to fix up the crime and neighborhoods mentioned in this video. Thanks for watching. For more content, like and subscribe to our channel.